They're two tech buds, and they're teching around. They're the tech talkers of the Tech Talk Lounge. Maybe today they're gonna tech the halls or scrutinize each other's Facebook walls. So tech some notes and tech it out. They're the tech talkers of the Tech Talk Lounge. Oh my god, shut up.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Tech Talk Lounge, where we invite guests working in the tech industry around the Bay Area to discuss their work, its impacts, and their thoughts on current news and events. I'm your host, Brian Lee. Today, our guest is Andrew Federici. Andrew is an award-winning technology executive who started his career in motion picture entertainment and had held leadership positions in product and marketing at AOL, MTV, and Facebook. He was part of a C-level leadership at 3 startups, and he currently serves as a head of marketing for a biotechnology company called Day 2, which used gut microbiome profiling to control blood sugar. Andrew, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Brian. It's a pleasure to be here.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. I want to start the show by talking about your work in the movie industry. What did you do and where did you work at?
Sure. I was lucky enough to work at Warner Brothers and Sony Pictures, Columbia Pictures, and my role was creative executive, which meant I was responsible for bringing in new projects to the studio to make them into movies and also to shepherd existing projects to the point of production.
What are some of the movies that you worked on?
I had the pleasure of working on Three Kings with Mark Wahlberg, the development of that project, which was a really fantastic, honest war movie about Iraq. 7 Years in Tibet with Brad Pitt, which was a fantastic story about Heinrich Harrer and his journey in Tibet and the Dalai Lama. And Bounce with Gwyneth Paltrow and Ben Affleck, which was a romantic tragedy in a way that ended up dramatic movie. So,
okay.
Yeah.
So please go into more detail about how you started. Did you start as an intern?
Great question. I'm proud to say that I started in the in the United Talent Agency mailroom, which was a rite of passage in Hollywood. An agent, a friend of mine, got me the job, and so I started in the talent management business.
That was very interesting. So so after you finished college, you went directly into the movie industry?
No, actually, I had interned at an advertising agency in New York. I worked there for 2 years, and then I felt the draw to entertainment, and so through some contacts I had, I got a job at United Talent Agency, and that's how I started.
Looking back now, what are some of your favorite and least liked things about working in the movie industry?
Sure. I would say that one of the highlights was going to the Oscars in '97 and being around the Saving Private Ryan team and seeing all that success was just staggering. And I would say moments where we were struggling with a story and we couldn't figure out how to change it to make it make sense or believable, and then we'd come up with this breakthrough that would somehow make sense. I would say those are the positives. I said, there are some dramatic, challenging personalities in Hollywood. I think we've all heard about that, and that's true. And those moments are tough. But the creative process and working with some of the wonderful directors and writers really make it very exciting.
So you like the work more than the people, or at least some of the people.
Yeah, I think the work itself is really amazing. I mean, creating fiction is just fun. It's exciting. But there are some moments that are challenging. So.
Okay. So you've worked in Hollywood for a few years. How many years did you work there exactly?
6 years.
6 years. So after 6 years, you've moved to working in large tech firms like AOL, Facebook, and MTV, as we've mentioned. What was the transition like for you?
Sure. I had this feeling in '99 that the democratization of content would happen with the advent of the internet. And so I felt like there was an opportunity to dive into that. And I felt the best path would be business school. And so that's the path I followed. And I would say, to be candid, some of the challenges and personalities and things in Hollywood were difficult. And so I felt like people who make movies kind of are always seen as movie makers and not really anything else. And I didn't want to be pigeonholed for the rest of my life and didn't want to be doing that particular role. So that's how I came to the transition.
This is a question that I'm personally interested about, is how much of making a movie is about, for you, how much is it actually about producing the movie and how much is it about everything else? Is it 100% focused on the plot of the movie, the actors, the set, everything like that? Or are you more focused on other things?
That's a really good question. The average movie takes about 10 years from the first time somebody thinks of it to the time it gets made.
10 years. Do you mean when the person first writes a book, or when the directing process starts?
From the very beginning that somebody says, I want to option this book and turn it into a movie, or I wrote this original screenplay and I want to turn it into a movie, it's just a long process. And part of that is the rights to the movie, part of that is attracting a director or actors to the movie, part of that is getting financing, part of that. You know, in most of the well-known big movies, you know, it just takes a long time. And so I would say that, gosh, you know, 70% of that process is probably getting it to the point where you have a start date and a schedule and the studio has greenlit it and it's ready to go. If it's an independent movie, of course, you know, the timing may be different, but the bigger movies tend to take a while. So I would say it's 70-30. You know, once you get it there, then it's like, okay, now it's 3 months of production and then maybe 2 or 3 months of post-production, and then the release date could be pushed a year because there's some other movie that's going to be made and maybe you want to win an award. And so there's all those little nuances that happen, but I would say 70-30 if I were to boil it down.
Did you feel that there was anything that you've learned from working in the movie industry that you felt was useful when you applied them to working in the tech industry?
Yes, I would say 3 things. Storytelling is one. Creative innovation, just thinking of new campaigns, new concepts, new ways of telling that story. And I would say perseverance, because in the movie industry, you have to persist. I mean, you have to push and push and push and never give up, because there are thousands of other people trying to get movies made. And if you're not pushing as hard as you possibly can, and so I think a lot of the drive that I have now and the precision and really comes from having been through working at a studio and taking that and bringing it into technology.
So you've worked at 3 large tech companies?
Yeah.
Facebook, AOL, and MTV.
Yeah.
And you've held leadership positions in marketing in all 3 of those companies. Please tell us more about your work there.
Sure. I had a really great opportunity at AOL through a former colleague from advertising. We created something called AOL Coaches, which was a self-help destination. So we had people like John Gray, Dr. John Gray of Mars Venus fame, and people like Jorge Cruz, fitness coach. And so we created this self-help hub where you could go on, and whether you're trying to find love, get out of debt, lose weight, you know, all of the things that we all want to do, and you could get help one-on-one with the coach. And they have video series and text, and so it was an innovative program at the time, and it got Webby recognition. So that was just an amazing experience, and I think some of my entertainment experience carried over into AOL at the time and helped me produce that with a lot of other people. It wasn't certainly not just me. And at MTV, I was able to, another part of an innovative team, we created the Epix movie channel. And it actually came out of a contract dispute between CBS and Viacom, which of course owned by the same people. But you know, Epix was Paramount and MGM and Lionsgate coming together and saying, we're going to create our own movie channel, and we're going to get it out there on all the cable systems. And so that was really fantastic.
Tell us about your work at Facebook.
Facebook, I was in charge of the business website. So if you wanted to advertise on Facebook, the group I was in was responsible for educating you about how to advertise on Facebook, signing you up and getting you started, and helping you along the way.
So for Facebook, you worked at their headquarters in Silicon Valley. Is that right?
I did, yes, the Menlo Park headquarters that are not too far from here.
Okay, and for MTV and AOL, both of those companies are based in New York. Did you work at their headquarters there?
I did. MTV is 1515 Broadway. It still is, right on Times Square.
Okay.
And AOL actually at the time was in Washington, D.C., and then moved up to New York.
So you must travel a lot.
Actually not a lot during those years because everything was happening in New York, and at Facebook, everything's happening at the headquarters. And so I think with some of the technology products, you don't have to be traveling a lot. I would say in my new role, I do go to conferences and talk a lot because we're a younger startup and we're trying to get our name out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I guess I probably meant you move a lot because you worked in all of these different companies. I mean, Hollywood, Los Angeles,
Yes.
New York,
Yes,
now
right.
in Silicon Valley.
That's right. I did a round trip. I went New York, LA, New York, San Francisco.
Okay.
Exactly right.
Okay. And after you've working, when did you work at Facebook? For how many years?
I worked there 2 years, and it was 2016 to 18.
2016 to 18. Okay. And I want to talk about your work at Facebook a bit more because
Sure.
Back in 2018, which is year that which is your last year at Facebook, 2018 to 2019, there was the Facebook data privacy scandal. And Facebook has been collecting millions of people's user data, and these data are used by companies like Cambridge Analytica and other data mining firms for nefarious purposes. And I was wondering what you think about Facebook role in all of this. Does Facebook know what their user data is being used for, or do you think they don't know it, or do you think that they do know it and they're just trying to hide?
Very good questions. I would say there's a misperception in the market about Facebook. Facebook has never sold user data and never will sell user data as far as we can tell. What happened with Cambridge Analytica, as Mark testified in front of the Senate, is that a third party had gained access along with other third parties based on the policies that were in place at the time. It gained access to that data and then lied about keeping it and deleting it. And so you had some third party that was basically being dishonest about what they did with that. Now, yes, you could say, should Facebook have followed up and made sure that, yes, of course. And in hindsight, I think Mark said that during the Senate hearings. But I think, Facebook is a 2 billion plus community. It's huge. When I was at AOL, that was kind of the first community online. It's not easy to manage that many people and that many things going on. I mean, even with AI and technology, it's just very hard. And, you try to look at the amount of money that's been raised for donations and for Red Cross on, all of the positive things happening on Facebook. But just like the rest of the world, there's positive and negative things. And there are bad actors and people come in and do things that are nefarious. Can you ever have a utopia in the real world or in online? I don't think so. I think you're always going to have challenges like that. But I think there is a little misconception about Facebook selling to, they just don't. They don't sell it. I mean, they sell advertising, and advertisers can use some of that anonymized data to target people, but that's it. So I would say it was a very tough time to be at Facebook when that started to happen, and people felt like that, Facebook was undermining democracy and hurting the world. And, it is it's the biggest platform we've ever seen in the history of the world. And, there are some bad things that people have done in the platform, and all you can do is try to minimize it.
So you feel that the cause for all of this was ignorance? It wasn't done on purpose?
Well, I would say, if somebody came to my house and stole my car and crashed and hit and hurt somebody, you might say, well, Andrew, how come you left the keys to your car? Or why didn't you have a better security system on your car? I know it's not exactly the same analogy, but I think that what I know from being at Facebook is that some of the smartest, hardest working people trying to do good in the world, and some third parties who took advantage of that data and lied about it did some bad things. And what do you do? What do you do if somebody steals your car and commits a crime, or somebody steals your identity, even worse, and commits a crime? I mean, that's a real problem. And I feel like some of that is what's going on here. And yes, Mark said in front of the Senate, we are responsible for what happens on our platform, which honestly, at AOL, that would have not been the case. I don't think that would have been the same answer. But for him to say that and take responsibility, I thought was a big deal. And it's going to be it's going to be a continuing challenge. Think about the billions of people all over the world doing live streams of who knows what. Now maybe one day AI tools will get to a place where 99.99% of it is contained. Right. Yeah. But it's a hard problem.
Okay, I think I agree with you, and I feel that the general problem for Facebook and many other companies like Google around, and even Amazon around Silicon Valley is data privacy. And I want to see what your opinions are on that, because on a scale of 1 to 10, how important do you think it is?
You asked one of the most important questions of the 21st century, data privacy. I think it's very important. I think it's something that is going to get more difficult to manage because our data is everywhere. It's out there, and to get it back is, I don't know, it's like putting toothpaste back in a tube. I think that if there are if there are uses of this data that are consistently nefarious and consistently being used to hurt people, I think then we have a problem. I think if we're using data to sell advertising or to do things that, frankly, a lot of people want, I don't like seeing ads that are not relevant to me. I know it sounds like a very advertising marketing thing to say, but it's true, and I ask, people, have you bought anything on Instagram? They're, oh my God, yes, I bought this thing it's great, I have this back brace or whatever it is, and it's amazing to hear those stories. And so I think data privacy is something that is always going to be a hot topic, and people are always going to feel like there's too much data out there. But the question is, what is the everyday impact to you or me or to the average person watching this? What is the daily impact of that data being out there in the world? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. Right. I mean, I assume that most of it is good. Every day I don't get some problem that, look what happened today because of my data. It doesn't really happen. I think it's a fear of the unknown. I think that's what makes this such a hot thing. It's like, well, but people know where I am, and if I travel to another country, people can see where I am on the map. There's all of that stuff. And I think it's the fear of, well, what could that mean and what could that be versus, well, every day my knee hurts because my data, it's not necessarily a tangible thing. But I think we have to be careful. We have to set appropriate laws. I think GDPR is, the European law that is very specific about how data is being used. And, I think we need to be thoughtful about how we manage data privacy.
Okay, moving on to what you're kind of doing right now. You are the head of marketing at Day 2, which is a biotechnology company. Is that right?
That's exactly right.
Tell us more about what you do.
Sure. So I'll tell you a little bit about Day 2.
Sure.
Day 2 is a science-based company. It came out of tech transfer from the Weizmann Institute, and it is a blood sugar control solution. And blood sugar is an interesting thing because controlling blood sugar actually impacts several chronic conditions. Type 2 diabetes being the most prevalent, but also prediabetes and other metabolic conditions. And so very simply, what Day 2 does is we take a gut sample from an individual, we sequence it, we sequence the DNA, not of the person, but of the gut bacteria, and we can predict blood sugar response to almost any food in the world. And what we do is we populate this app on your phone with about 1 million plus foods, and you can see what foods are actually going to spike your blood sugar and what combinations will actually blunt that spike. And so we are a solution for type 2 diabetes and for prediabetes and likely other conditions as we continue to evolve our solution. But we're a food as medicine company. So we tell you what you should be eating so that your bacteria can process it and your blood sugar is stable. And this is not only good for people who are sick with diabetes, but it's also good for athletes and Olympians who want to maintain a controlled blood sugar. They don't want to crash and get low energy and tired, in the middle of a race or middle of a competition. And so that's what we do.
Do you guys typically, are your customers large companies, more of, large companies, or individuals, or kind of both?
That's a great question. In the U.S., we are focused on large employers because about 60% of the U.S. is insured through their company, and so we want to be where we can help the most people. Right. We do have a consumer offering that's been around for 4 years or so as well, but our real focus is insurance companies here in the U.S., large employers, and hospital systems.
Are they two completely different plans, or is the difference only in that for the large companies, the people who pay for those costs is the company, and for individuals, it's the person who's actually buying the plan?
That's a great question, Brian. You've hit the nail on the head. Yes, in the large companies, the employer, most of the large companies in the U.S. are self-insured, which means they take the risk of healthcare. For instance, Boeing, I want to ask you, guess how much money Boeing spends on healthcare for its employees in one single year?
Boeing, I would say around between $10 to $100 million. That's my guess.
It's a great guess. It's actually $2.5 billion a year in healthcare costs. Okay. And about $70 million of that is type 2 diabetes. And so what we do is we say we can help lower that cost because we're going to tell people what they should be eating so they don't have this condition. We can get them on a path to remission where they aren't taking medications anymore, they aren't going to hospital visits, they aren't going to doctor's visits, and all that cost savings means the employer can lower that number and produce healthy employees who are not sickened by this disease. And it all comes back to the food pyramid in the U.S., which was formulated a long time ago. I'm actually part of a council that we're trying to institute a National Institute of Nutrition in the U.S. as part of the National Institute of Health, because we came up with this food pyramid, which was like, eat starchy vegetables and fatty things. And it's like, okay, guess what? What's happened? Well, 40% of the U.S. is now prediabetes or type 2. That's not good. And so we're on a mission to reverse that.
So let's say I'm an individual and I want to sign up for the Day 2 plan. What should I do?
You can go to day2.com and you can purchase a gut microbiome kit, and you will have a consultation with one of our dietitians. And we will help you formulate a meal plan that you can follow for the rest of your life and know what you should be eating and what you shouldn't, what your gut bacteria can process. And the gut, it changes over time, but the majority of it stays very much the same. And so you will know what you should be eating and what not.
So you only need to send one sample?
One sample.
Okay.
That's it. And our algorithm predicts. Now, we do recommend retesting once a year because the gut will evolve as you start changing your eating habits. Now, with employers, we have a much more robust program where we meet with you every week and we have dietitians and everything. But as a consumer, you can go online today and buy the kit and get a consultation.
Okay. And you said that you could sign up through your website, which is day2.com.
Yes.
And you guys also have an app, right?
We do. That's right. That's where we populate the results.
Okay.
Once your gut is profiled, we score all of those million foods on a 1 to 10 scale, And we tell you, okay, 7 and above is where your blood sugar is going to be stable. So you can look up any food. I mean, I've been at dinners or conferences where I'm like, okay, let me see. I put in the ingredients and I can see like, oh boy, this score is not good. And then I'm like, okay, well, what if I add bacon or what if I add something? And then I can see in real time, it's going to be good. But for the most of us who are eating every day at our houses and homes and lunch, you know, we can set our meal plan for life essentially and be like, okay, this is what I'm going to eat. And the great thing is, a lot of people who have diabetes or metabolic conditions, they're told you can't eat this and you can't eat that, and don't, if it tastes good, don't eat it, and you know. Our solution says we work with you where you are. If you like salmon and rice and broccoli, okay, maybe that spikes your blood sugar, but we're going to add soy sauce, or we're going to add butter, or we're going to add olive oil, and all of a sudden you're stable. So that's the beauty of our solution.
Okay, so to wrap everything up, I mean, you've worked at certainly almost everywhere. You know, you've worked in Hollywood, in Silicon Valley, in large tech firms, and also small companies like startups, all sorts of startups. Do you feel that there's a difference between working at larger companies compared to smaller ones? Do you feel that you get more freedom when you're working in smaller companies, more control?
Yes, Brian, you're right. At a smaller company, you have a lot more input, a lot more contribution, but the stakes are much higher because you don't necessarily have the cash flow for 10 years. So you have 3 to 5, 3 years, and you need to make that progression. And so I think that's very different. I think in a large company, you can afford to fail a lot before things get really hairy.
Right.
And so, yeah, I think there is a lot more input, a lot more contribution you can make. But if you're part of a very innovative group in a large company, like we were at Epix in Viacom, we were up on the 50th floor, like 10 of us in a room. You can also have a lot of impact. It's part of it is luck, part of it is opportunity and persistence, but you can find those opportunities, I think, anywhere.
Which one do you like more working at?
I have to say I like startups more. I think the stakes are higher, the opportunity's bigger, and it's more fun. It's a smaller kind of organization where you don't have to talk to 50 people to get something done, which sometimes in big companies is the way it goes.
Okay, and you also get to interact and talk with a lot more with other people as compared to in larger companies. You just have to finish the work and do what people tell you to. So, but
that's right.
Unfortunately, our time is up. There's really a lot more that I wanted to talk with you about, but thank you again for coming to our show, sharing your insights with us, your story, and your journey. I really want to thank you again. And I also want to thank our Mid-Penn Media crew and everyone who's working behind the scenes to make this show possible. This show wouldn't be possible without you guys. So that's it, and thanks again. Until next time, have a good one. Peace out.
Thank you, Brian.
Thanks.